Hey, this is Andrew Brzezinski, and today we're going to be talking about the Thypoch Eureka 50mm f2 versus the OG, the original 50mm Summicron Collapsible. Let's check it out. So I'd like to thank Thypoch for supplying the lens for the review. I've used it actually in New York City, so I'm going to start this video off with my first impressions of using the aluminum version of this lens in New York City, and then we're going to go and take this lens out for a spin by the water, and then after that we're going to dive into the images. So I spent a good evening, half day with this Eureka 50mm f2 from Thypoch. Great performer, really fun lens to use. I'll just go over the features real quick. It's a clickless aperture 50mm f2 collapsible lens. It's super sharp. It's a double Gauss design, so nothing too fancy. It's got a high refractive element in there as well, in one of the 6 elements. So it's got classic charm with modern, assistances with regards to lens technology. So it's a charmer. It reminds me a lot of my version 5 Summicron with regards to rendering, just looking at the screen and with some of the test photos I've seen. So I'm going to really look at the test photos I've taken today and get a more educated assessment. But so far so fun. I actually like the hood and the filter that's right on here. They kind of make the lens look a lot cooler. So it was a blast trying out the Eureka in New York City, but here I am back in Montreal, and I don't know if you could tell, but I actually asked Thypoch to send me the brass version rather than the aluminum one that I was borrowing in New York City, and here it is on my M10R. It's really nice. You definitely can appreciate the added weight. All the quirks and the optics seem to be identical as they are with the aluminum one, but I feel like it would be only fair to compare this 50f2 collapsible double Gauss design lens to the original, well, sort of original. This is the original M mount one at least, Summicron Collapsible. So as you can see, aesthetically they're extremely similar, and here with their hoods off, you can start to see where their differences lie. So this is a Summicron Collapsible, and this is a Thypoch Eureka 50f2. So a lot of similarities. Obviously, price-wise, they're going to be pretty similar too when you're shopping for a used like a Summicron Collapsible. They don't go for that much money. But, and a big but, there are so many quirks that come with buying a lens that is this old. You have to deal with the oils that are old. You have to deal with basically a lens that's been on this planet for 70 years, 60 years. This copy here is from the 1950s, and this lens is brand new with a warranty. You can buy this at B&H. So that's a huge bonus with regards to value proposition for the Thypoch. The Leica Summicron is an early lens, an old lens at the end of the day, and it's got early multi-coating. So this Summicron Collapsible that I have is in otherwise pretty good aesthetic shape, except you can just scratch these lenses by breathing on them. And this front element on my Summicron Collapsible, although it may look like it's good, it's covered in hairline scratches, and that only contributes to the fog that you get when you take pictures with this thing. So when I use the Summicron Collapsible, I pretty much have to use the hood all the time, because any stray light that comes onto the front element just makes it flare and get all hazy. So it's like having a built-in mist filter. Hold on, let's just put in my trusty Uberworth bag here, a little product placement. It's going strong, I've had it for a year. So this Thypoch Eureka, if I take off this hood and filter, which are really awesome, it just looks like an abyss of glass. It's just so multi-coated. You can hardly, you can't even tell that there's glass in this thing. it's gorgeous to look at, and that translates to superb, superb image quality. And aesthetics aside and optical formulas aside, they may look a lot similar on paper, the Summicron Collapsible and this Eureka Collapsible, but let me tell you, this Eureka is modern and sharp. It's just a double Gauss design, just 6 elements, but you get this gorgeous, like a Summicron V5 looking image to it, but it's crisp, 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 super sharp, really good flare resistant, and lots of contrast, lots of micro contrast. It just feels like something that Leica would release, honestly. The build quality is fantastic. The focus throw is nice and smooth. One thing that does bother me is the fact that when you focus this thing down to infinity, or up to infinity, the infinity lock is right at the lens release tab. And although it does, on the distance scale, say it goes down to a meter, like the Summicron Collapsible, it actually goes down a little closer. I'd say about 0.7 meters, maybe 0.8. It doesn't feel exactly as close as like my 50 Summilux or my 50 Summicron V5. It doesn't really feel like it gets as close, but hey, anything closer than a meter is a bonus with this kind of lens. And other than that, clickless aperture, awesome little lens. I'm excited to compare this with the 50 Summicron Collapsible, but I already know the Collapsible is going to be nowhere near as crisp as this lens is. In the corners, up close, maybe the depth of field on this 50 Summicron might be different, so let's go check the differences out right now and take a few sample pictures. So on the 50 Summicron Collapsible, the throw is almost at a different angle here, but you can see this is where infinity usually lies on a Leica lens. And then it goes all the way up here, so it goes slightly closer than a meter, but it's pretty much a meter. Oh yeah, there's so much more contrast coming out of the Thypoch, it's absolutely crazy. It's very easy to differentiate which lens I use because the Summicron is so glowy. And glowy in the front element is just rubbed out. I love the Summicron Collapsible. It's nice to see that someone else has made a worthy successor because the Summicron V5 is, at the end of the day, a lens designed from the 1970s and just in a new body. So this Thypoch Eureka really does feel like the successor to the original Summicron Collapsible, but also the version 5 Summicron, because it's nothing fancy optical formula, but it works so well. And this just shows you how ready Thypoch is as a lens manufacturer to compete with the big dogs. So we're back at home and I've had some time to dive into the images and do some comparisons and look at my test photos. And a lot of what I thought I would see as differences between these two lenses, I was correct about. So let's dive into the images, shall we? I'll start off with a simple picture of the canal here, right? This is the Eureka, starting off with the Eureka. It's sharp, there's a bit of softness in the edges, but really, I wouldn't even call it that soft. It's pretty damn perfect. This is at f2, so sharp, sharp, sharp. There's a lot of vignetting. Now the Summicron Collapsible is just this glowy, globby, full of character image. I mean, you can really see how far we've come with optics, and yeah, that collapsible lens is, honestly, it reminds me a lot of, this is my steel rim reissue. It reminds me a lot of the steel rim reissue, so I can use the Summicron collapsible like I would with the the steel rim, but I don't know, it just doesn't do the same thing that the steel rim does for me with the collapsible. Anywho, yeah, so you can see that at f2, it's sharp in the middle. Honestly, it's pretty sharp. I don't really have any gripes with that, but as you start going towards the edges, you get a lot of smearing, you get a lot of nothing good. Character, let's call it. Vignetting, of course, the corners are just, swooshy. But it's nice. Not much chromatic aberration, by the way, between these two. This is like the only time I'm going to mention it because I really hardly ran into any chromatic aberrations on either of them. And I mean, this would be a good case scenario here with some trees in the foreground. And yeah, not really. No. Nothing that would ever detract from the image. So here's a picture of Emma taking the video of me when we're outside. So as you can see, the bokeh on the Summicron Collapsible here is pretty busy, but there's a nice kind of swirly aspect to it, and it does retain that glassy Leica look that I like. There's some optical vignetting on the bokeh balls. You can see that the extremities are brighter than they are in the middle. Yeah, it gets kind of busy. I like the way the 50 Summicron renders. I always did like the bokeh of this lens. It's very classic, and it adds to the charm, right? That low contrast, low saturation, but decent sharpness and cool bokeh, swirly kind of bokeh too. It's really cool. And now this other image of Emma is with the Eureka, and you can see the Eureka is freaking sharp. The bokeh is pretty modern, but it's actually pretty similar to the Summicron Collapsible. It's just a little bit less swirly, a little bit more corrected optically. I mean, especially with regards to sharpness, it's freaking sharp. So here we have this railing by the canal, and this is where you can really appreciate the differences between the lenses. So same temperature on both images for the white balance, and you can see how much cooler the Thypoch renders, but honestly, I think it's just how warm the Summicron renders that we have to mention, because this Thypoch renders a bit cooler, but not cooler than I would expect from any other lens manufacturer. It just shows you how warm the Collapsible renders. So the Collapsible just looks like somebody put a mist filter on, or someone sneezes on your front element. That has a lot to do with the multi-coating, but also a lot to do with just the age and the time that this lens was conceived. But it's also pretty scratched up, so it's not the best example. I'm sure there are better copies out there to compare this with, but this is what I have at my disposal, and it still is going to give me a good general idea. With the Summicron, I usually just add a little bit of dehaze anyway, but it's a pretty sharp lens. I mean, it's definitely perfectly calibrated to my M10R, as we can see, and you can see the bokeh get a little bit busy, but this is where it gets pretty interesting. On the left, we have the Summicron, and on the right, we have the Thypoch Eureka. Bokeh is pretty close amongst both of them. They both have a little bit of character to them. Obviously, the Summicron is picking up a lot more detail, but there's optical vignetting on both. The foliage is busy on both, but yeah, the Collapsible is a lot busier. It's pretty funky. So you can really appreciate the Thypoch here. Cooler rendering, a lot more contrast. Like, it's crazy how much contrast the Eureka has. I had to lower the contrast in some of my images on this, and then I really could appreciate just how sharp and how much micro contrast that this lens retains. It's really fun to use, especially on a high megapixel sensor like the M10R. So now we're gonna go to another bokeh test right here. Here we have a lamp here, a light, and you can see the bokeh get pretty swirly in the background. I got the focus, but you can see the glow coming in from the highlights around the light post here. Pretty nice. You know, there's some field curvature to be had, which contributes to that swirliness here as the bokeh the bokeh balls are outlined, and then it's a lot more corrected on the Eureka. It's just a sharp lens, the Eureka. Like, this is, if you told me this was an aspherical Leica Summicron re-release, not an Apo, definitely not an Apo, but pretty damn close, honestly, I would believe you. So now a little infinity shot here. You can see just, this looks like your run-of-the-mill classic, you know, Leica lenses. Very high contrast on the Eureka here, and then there we go. The Summicron Collapsible is just glowy, 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 glowy. You look at the way it picks up on the highlights here on this lamppost. Pretty damn good. Very low coma, very well done. Look at that, just hazy, hazy, hazy. The berries here are backlit, so you get an idea of just how the flare resistance of the Thypoch is pretty damn good. Lots of ghosting on that Summicron Collapsible. At infinity on the Collapsible, same thing. Edges are a bit soft. There's a ton of vignetting, and then when we start stopping it down, the edges start picking up really nicely, which is nice. But then a kind of weird veiled hazing is coming into play here. I don't know if it's from the fact that the front element is just so scratched, because the edges are definitely retaining more contrast in the center. But then it cleans up pretty nicely. Honestly, I like the collapsible a lot. The Thypoch, just like, whatever, we're good. Like, it's sharp. The Thypoch is sharp at f2. Lots of vignetting, honestly, but it's to be expected with both of these. So stopping the Eureka down, a lot of the vignetting dissipates, and at infinity, I mean, really, it's sharp. This Eureka is a fantastic all-around lens, great for landscapes. When I was in New York City, I just had a blast with this thing. I would shoot it wide open, stop down, whatever. It never felt like the Thypoch was holding me back, and it really made it a fun street lens. Now let's go to our little controlled studio test. So at f2, the Eureka is modern, sharp, nice 3D pop here, nice colors, great saturation, lots of contrast. 2.8. Vignetting starts to go away. f4, vignetting still going away. Sharpness is just getting sharper and sharper. 5.6, pleasant, and then f8, nice and sharp. And then I refocused at f8, because if you see here at 5.6, the face is not that sharp. If I zoom in a little more, it's focused on the gears, but if you go back here at f2.8, or yeah, at 2.8, the face is more in focus. And f4, we're moving backwards. We're at the gears now. f8, you can see the focus has shifted. And now, now that I'm focused on the clock face at f8, I open it up to f2, boom, it's not in focus. So there's a focus shift of about 1 or 2 inches here. Not a lot. The Summicron is the exact same, so let's check out the Summicron. Summicron is actually pretty damn sharp at f2. 2.8, we're in business. Things are pretty damn sharp across the frame. And as you can see, I'm stopping it down. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. The gears are in focus now, but I was pretty damn spot on the face here at f2. And now the gears are in focus. So as we get to f8, the focus has shifted. So what that means is there's a focus shift on both of these. Do I notice it? Have I noticed it? Never. So this is at the minimum focusing distance of about 1 meter, and it's starting to tell me why the minimum focusing distance is that far away on these lenses, because any closer, I would start, this would be a bigger annoyance for me, but at infinity and medium distances, you're never gonna have that issue with either of these lenses. The experience is pretty interchangeable amongst both of them. The Thypoch Eureka just feels like a modern version of a Leica Summicron. And the contrast is actually so high and the saturation is so punchy on this Eureka that I am inclined to actually lower the contrast on the images, and you can really just appreciate the optical, just the pure sharpness of this Eureka and the micro contrast that it retains. The gradation, the 3D pop of the images with this Thypoch just seems to just come in droves. When I was doing street photography with this lens in New York City, I was blown away by just how beautiful the images were. Looking at the screen on my M10R, I was already impressed, but then going home and actually diving into the files, I was even more impressed. It is a wonderful lens to use, and it does feel like a worthy successor to the original Summicron Collapsible. And it really shows you that the Summicron Collapsible just honestly can't really be compared to this lens, because this is a 70-year-old lens. Where the differences, where the similarities lie is, of course, in their design. They're very similar. Obviously, this Eureka has a lot of cool, quirky things, like the hood, where you have to screw these little tabs here, and you can either have the filter, which is really nice. I really didn't see much of a, I would say, handicap when you're using the UV filter here. And then this hood is really nice too. The flare resistance is actually so good on the Eureka that you're just using it for the aesthetics. The Eureka just feels like a wonderful, refined product, and I really enjoyed using it. The clickless aperture is something that you just get used to. The aperture blades are gorgeous and rounded, and there's 12 of them, which is so nuts. in such a tiny package. I mean, not even the modern, version 5 Summicron has 12 blades. I think it has 8. So yeah, it has 8. I remember. But it's just a nice nod to just how good Thypoch is at producing lenses. And I've been really enjoying their products, honestly. I think this manufacturer is a bit too humble. I got to see in New York City where they come from, and they've been around for about 10 years in China producing cinema lenses, and they've just been innovating and innovating and innovating, and had the opportunity to play with some of their cinema lenses, and it just was such a cool experience to see what they are capable of and the optical qualities and just what they can do. And it's nice to see that they took their know-how and shoved it into such a tiny package, as well as with the Cimeras, the 1.4s, the 35, the 28, and the soon-to-be 50 millimeter, from what I hear. You'll see soon enough, I guess. But yeah, this Thypoch Eureka is fantastic, and if you're considering getting one, I mean, it's really cool because you're just getting what I would consider the modern equivalent of a nice classic like a Summicron without any of the headaches of the scratch front element that I have here, and of course all the benefits of modern optical engineering. So I'd like to thank Thypoch once again for supplying this lens. Really cool lens. Thank you for the wonderful experience, and thank you for the experience in New York City. Really cool to just play around with a lens in a beautiful city like New York City. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.